There we go. I think he's on. There you go, 45 seconds that's been in. Good morning. It's December. It's literally about 10 days before Christmas. It's a little bit milder today, but this is a perfect opportunity for me to just have a session fishing with bomb and corn. I'm going to be targeting carp and F1s on this very well-known commercial fishery, and I'll just show you the setup and the kind of approaches that we use when we're tackling lakes like this in winter. The peg for today, this is peg 51. If you just have a look round like that, we've actually got 2 points here. This peg has been doing well in the matches. I haven't drawn this area personally myself yet this winter, but it does keep throwing up weights, and you can see why. You know, you've got the middle of the lake. When you're thinking about location for fishing, especially in winter, I've got plenty of open water there in front of me. We have got a bit of depth at our feet as well, but as you can see just here, you've actually got 2 points. So it is almost like a natural patrol route between the main body of the lake here and the back of the lake over there. Now, I have been told that this area, the back lake here, is shallower than the main part, but as you'd expect, you're always going to get fish moving through between these 2 points, and this point and the other peg over there, which is peg 23, has been a favoured area as well. So I've got loads and loads of options, and that's something that, you know, it's worth thinking about in winter. Thinking about, you know, the water clarity has gone much clearer. If I just pan down there, just look how clear that water is in comparison to how it is actually through the warmer summer months. So you've got to expect that fish will possibly have a tendency to back off into open water. In this particular scenario, there's all the water there to my left, there's water to my right, and then there's water straight out in front of me, and then I've got this patrol route. So as regards options, a peg like this is ideal when you're thinking about location. I've seen 1 or 2 fish moving out there, so I'm expecting we are going to catch a few fish. But let me just show you the setup, I'm going to show you the rigs, and more importantly to a lot of people is I'm just going to show you how I'm going to approach the swim, because it's nice to have a plan. You don't always know where the fish are going to be, but it's nice to have a starting point, and then just think about where you might progress to throughout the session. But like I said, on a peg like this, I've got loads and loads of options. Now, for this style of fishing, I was always a fan of 11-foot rods. Now, if I was to be fishing further out, you know, past 30 metres, an 11-foot rod can make that job much, much easier for you. However, today, by the very nature of this style of fishing, quite often you're loose feeding. So because you're loose feeding via catapult, that automatically determines how far out you can fish. For the last 2 winters, I've almost exclusively used 9-foot rods for this style of fishing, because a 9-foot rod is nice and soft. It's not too long, it's really nice and compact. It really helps with playing fish, which is something I can show you a little bit later on. But it also means that I can easily cast to the ranges that you might be able to loose feed to. You know, it's a personal thing, but it's something that I've done for the last 2 winters. In this particular case, I'm using an XRC. It's the Ethos range XRC feeder 9-foot. Now, the word feeder basically means that this rod is a little bit stronger than the bomb version. So if you're looking at short rods like this, and there is one with the word bomb on there, that will generally mean that that rod is a little bit softer than the feeder version. Now, you might be wondering why I've gone for the feeder version, and that is basically because the lake that I'm fishing, whilst there are lots and lots of F1s and small carp in here, there are fish in here well into double figures and approaching that 20-pound mark. If I was to use the bomb version, it wouldn't have quite as much backbone to land those bigger fish. So by using the feeder version, it gives me the best of both worlds. It's soft enough to land and play those smaller fish, but it's got enough backbone to allow me to potentially land any of those really big double figure carp. Now, as regards the actual reel and line for this sort of fishing, because it's a short rod, you only need a small compact reel. Simple as that. You're not casting big ranges, you know, long range. You're not doing any of that sort of fishing, so you might as well use a really nice compact reel that's going to match the length of the rod. And in this case, I've got a 3000 Horizon, well, it's the HX Pro 3000, and that is actually loaded with 8-pound Horizon line. I did used to use 6-pound for a lot of this sort of fishing. However, because the Horizon is such low diameter, I've actually just stepped it up to 8-pound, and that is still in line with most other 6 and 8-pound lines that are out there on the market. So you've got a really nice thinner line, but you've got that extra little bit of strength as well. No fancy shock leaders, really simple fishing. And this particular rod, for those that are interested, has actually got a 1 ounce tip in it. As regards the actual rig, I'll show you this now before we get fishing. I do use a couple of different sorts of bombs for this sort of fishing, but to kick off, this is the one that I'm going to be using. I've got the 8-pound line, simple as that. I've then got a 10-gram pellet bomb on there, free running. It has got to be free running here to comply with fishery rules, and that is a free running bomb just to one of the Matrix quick change adapters, hook length adapters there, which enables me to quickly and easily just change my hook length. So I could change it for one with a band, one with a bayonet, or one with a speed stop. You know, it just makes it really, really simple. And you're not going to get a rig that's much simpler than that, are you? You get that semi bolt effect there just by that pushing in there, which means a lot of the bites that you get are actually drop bites as the fish has dislodged the bomb when it's hooked itself. And I can change that bomb to a lighter one. Now, I'll be absolutely honest, if I was fishing a venue that was really shallow, if it was flat calm, if it was much, much colder, then you might find that stepping that bomb down to the 7.5 gram or even a 5 gram version might be better, because it's just that little bit more stealthier. It makes less of a splash when it goes in. However, the lake that I'm fishing today is approximately 10 feet deep, you know, it might be a little bit more. And so when you start fishing with lighter bombs out there in that sort of depth, whilst it does go in really nice and quietly, it can take forever to tighten up to it. It depends if you've got a crosswind, that might affect how you're sinking your line, and you might find that it takes you ages to set your tip. So if you are fishing a deeper lake like this, particularly if you're going to go past 25, 30 meters plus, then you might find that you want to step that up to a 20 gram bomb. It just might mean that it's going to straighten your line out that little bit better, and you're going to be able to tighten up to your bomb that little bit quicker. So that's the rig, really simple. So all I need to do is get a hook length on that. Hook lengths for my bomb fishing, I keep them on spools like that. You know, lots of different strengths, different size hooks. You might have some with bands on, some with bayonets. For me, this winter in particular, I've found that a 30 centimetre hook length has been best. I'm not saying that's always the case. Sometimes you might find that one shorter than that is better. It just depends on the venue and on the circumstances that you're faced with. So in this particular case, for today, I've got a size 14 hook, and that is attached to 0.15 hook length, which breaks at about 5 pound, and that is actually tied up to a speed stop, which is going to allow me to put either a single or a double corn hook bait. And all I do with this quick change adapter is just slide that off there. All my hook lengths have got loops on. You can just loop that on there really easily. These are really good for people, you know, if you're struggling, if you've got great big fat fingers, or your hands are cold in winter, or your eyes aren't so good. These are just a nice size. They're nice and compact, but they're big enough for just about everybody to use. And there we go, that is it, that's the rig. So I've got a bomb there, 30 centimetre hook length, and then I've got the hook and hair rig there. And that is it, we're ready to go. Only thing I need to sort out now is just sort out my side tray, my bait tray, and then I'll decide how I'm going to tackle this peg. One of the things I love about this style of fishing is how simple your bait tray actually is. All we've got today, if you're fishing on a budget or you want to keep things really nice and simple, then this can be a great way of fishing, especially through winter. All I've got bait wise is a tin of corn. Now it's entirely up to you what sort of corn you use. There are lots of different flavours out there. They're the cheap ones that you can get from the supermarket. For today I'm using the F1 corn. I love the F1 flavour. We use it a lot in the pellets, and you know, it's just down to confidence. You know, it's one of those things that, you know, if you're confident in any particular flavour corn, then just go for it. I've got one tin there, which is going to be plenty for today's session. That's all I've got on the tray there. The other thing I've got is a baiting needle. That is just simply so that I can mount the corn onto the hair. That's the only thing I've got there. And then the final thing, a catapult. That is it. That's all I need for this. All I'm going to be doing is loose feeding corn in one area, casting the bomb to different areas around the swim searching for fish. So naturally I need a catapult in order to loose feed that corn. Now on some venues you might be fishing at short range with the corn, so you might not need a catapult. If you can feed it accurately within range by hand, that's fine, but obviously on some lakes you need to go out a little bit further out, and that's where a catapult comes in. Make sure it's a nice strong one. You want one that's durable, you don't want one that's going to be breaking on you. And for me, I always prefer a catapult that's got the pouch that's actually got a flat bit at the bottom. You know, you generally find that, particularly with corn, it just helps group in that little bit. Certainly if you've got the right technique with a catapult, it does come with practice, but the accuracy of the way that you feed the corn can be very, very important during winter. So try your very best to just try and group that corn the best you can. And if you've got to sacrifice a little bit of range, if you've got some wind like we have today that's blowing into us, then you might want to come back a little bit, just so that you're sacrificing a little bit of range, but just hopefully to try and make sure that it's grouping really, really nicely. We've got that wind blowing into me today, and it's not ideal in winter, I'll be honest with you. There are quite often occasions in winter, particularly when it's a cold wind, that you might be better off like those lads have over there, where they've actually got the wind off their backs. So I'm just going to start off with a single grain of corn. There are 2 or 3 different ways of hooking corn, which I'll show you in a while. And so I've got that on there. I'm just putting it through the side, as you can see on this particular occasion. There are different ways of doing it, and then I always make sure that that bomb is actually in place there. The next thing that I'm going to do is always make sure your drag's undone. We're not fishing to a line clip, and lots of the bites on here on this style of fishing can almost be violent, and they can certainly catch you out, especially if you're not paying complete attention like in winter. You might not be quite so much, you know, when you're looking around or pouring a cup of coffee out. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to start at about 20 metres, just straight in front of me. Just there. Now that's a little bit too far to feed accurately today, I'll be honest, with that wind blowing into me. So I am going to feed somewhere else. So I just want to position that so I've got a nice angle in the tip. Because when I do get one of those bites, we want the rod to absorb the bite, if that makes sense, you know. If you almost point your tip at the bomb, then the rod doesn't get a chance to bend when you get a bite or when you hook a fish. And that can be how people lose fish, you know, they can get broke on fish. Whereas if you have a bit of an angle on it, I know it's very much an old school thing, I know it is. But it just means that when the bite goes, the rod's taking all that, the bend and the power, you know, and that's what the rod's for. And you'll find that way that you'll break on less fish. So I've got that just set how I like it, there we go. Now what this is going to do is I'm going to set my stopwatch, which can be very, very important. It's a great guide to have some sort of a stopwatch, because you can just monitor how long you've spent in each area. You know, it can be really easy to lose track of time when you're fishing like this. You know, sometimes, particularly if you're talking to the anglers at the next peg, and you know, it's easy to forget how long it's actually been out there. So all I'm going to do is I'm literally going to have 5 minutes. That's all I'm going to have. And what this is going to tell me is that whether I catch a fish or not, by watching the tip, by keeping the line reasonably tight, it's going to tell me if there's any fish out there. You know, if I'm casting past fish, for example, you're going to be getting indications. You'll probably get signs that there's fish there, whether you catch any or not. And if that's the case, it's great to start with, because it's telling you that there are some fish out there, which obviously helps your confidence. And it might also tell you that you're casting a little bit too far. And on the flip side of that, if I was to leave that there now for 5 minutes, which I'm going to, and I don't get any indications or I don't catch a fish, then that might suggest that I'm not quite far enough out, or I'm not in the right area. And so by using a stopwatch, you can literally almost allocate yourself little blocks of time, and that way you can almost map out your swim, if that makes sense. I'm not saying 5 minutes is the ultimate time. Sometimes you might find it's 10 minutes, and if I'm not catching, and if it's a really hard day, there are times you might leave it out there up to 20 minutes, depending on how hard it is and the venue. But to start with, I'm going to start on 5 minutes, and I want to loose feed corn somewhere. Now, as you can see, I've got that wind coming in. So for me to feed anywhere out there with corn, it's going to be very, very difficult. You know, I can do it, but it's going to be spreading the corn everywhere. But I've got loads of room today. I could feed corn to my left. One thing I might do is, just to my left here, there's a platform. Now, I know there are occasions, particularly late on in a session, where you can catch fish in front of that, and that's something to think about for later on. But because of the direction of the wind, I haven't got any anglers to my right. I'm going to loose feed the corn slightly to my right, and that is just because it's just going to make it a little bit easier with that wind, because it's coming this way. It's just going to make it a little bit easier and a little bit more accurate. Now, I'm not going to feed a hell of a lot, because we don't know how, you know, hard it's going to be. But I'm just going to put half a dozen grains of corn in. I'm just going to feed that. Pick a line that you're going to feed on. So I'm going to go for that peg there, and that is it. That's all I'm going to feed, just there. That is literally probably 12 meters, so it's long pole range. But I also know there that there's virtually maximum depth there, or there will be a good 10 feet of water there. And that is it. There we go. That was a fish just rise there. Probably the same range that I've cast this bomb out, but further to the right, bang in line with where I fed the corn actually. So that was a fish. So while you're sat here, that's been out there just nearly 3 minutes. because everything's self-hooking, it gives you time to look round the lake. Have a look where fish are topping, if there are any topping, where are they showing. Because while I'm sat here now, I'm thinking about my next cast. If I catch one here, then that's brilliant. But if I don't, I've got to think about where I'm going to go to next. Sometimes, you know, if you're fishing at, say it was a match for example, you've got 5 hours, set that stopwatch. There we go, I think he's on. There you go, 45 seconds that's been in. Literally only about 2 meters further out than where I was. 45 seconds. It just shows you that even in December, just before Christmas, if you can find where the fish are and they want to feed, that you haven't got to wait a long time for bites. So this is where your 9-foot rod comes in, you know, because these fish are going to come up nice and close. I'm not going to bully them. They come up nice and close so that they're easier for netting. There we go. There we go. How about that? Absolutely fantastic. With this style of fishing, the fish are self-hooking. You know, because it's a hair rig, it's just because of the nature of the fishing. The fish are self-hooking, so that on days when it is really, really cold, you know, when you get a cold wind blowing or if it's raining, then one of the great things is that you can actually, he's quite lively actually. There we go. Fantastic stamper fish, you know, and very common at this sort of venue. Let's get him back. Yeah, one of the things that I find really enjoyable about it is that because everything's self-hooking, because they are hair rigs, you can literally sit there with your hands in your pockets. You know, if it is cold, you can sit there drinking your tea or your coffee or your soup. And when you get a bite, the fish is on. So even when the conditions are bad, you can sit there with your hands in pockets, stay nice and warm. And when it goes, it's just a case of picking the rod up, you know. And whilst I like to be active in my fishing, I love to fish with a rod on my knee. I love it when you're fishing for roach, skimmer's bream. During winter, when the conditions are bad, it could just be a much more comfortable way of fishing. You know, and let's face it, you know, if you can be more comfortable in winter and catch fish, then surely that's the way to go. So let's see if we can catch some more just by dotting a bomb around out there. But whatever happens, I'm going to keep that cone going in on that loose fed line. This is turning into a true winter session. The water's really, really cold, and I've caught 2 or 3 fish. Not as good as what I thought it was going to be. And what I've actually done is, with that 10-gram bomb and that 9-foot rod setup, I've just been dotting the bomb around at different ranges, and that wind keeps getting a little bit stronger. However, what's happened now is I've chased the fish round. I've caught about 3 fish, I think now. I've lost a good fish that I pulled out of, and now it's just gone dead. So no matter where I put the bomb now, I'm not getting any indications whatsoever. So that's telling me that either the fish have stopped feeding, which obviously there's not a lot I can do about that, but the other thing as well is they've perhaps moved out of range. As I mentioned earlier, the 10-gram bomb setup that I'm using, you have got limitations with it. You can only cast it so far, and when you've got a wind blowing into you like this, it can limit the ranges that you can fish. So if you are faced with open water like this is when the other rig will come into play, and that's what I've got here. Now, I could fish with this setup that I've got here on that 9-foot rod. It's just I happen to have this already set up on another rod, which is an 11-foot rod. But like I say, this setup you could just use with that same 9-foot setup. And as you can see, it involves a stem, so it's got a longer stem. Again, it's free running, as you can see, so it's a free running stem. And what this enables me to do is to put a heavier bomb on. So these bombs here, this particular one's 20 grams, which is twice the weight that we've had. So that's going to allow me to cast into that wind better, help me to go, you know, further out. And I can change these. I mean, these bombs come in different weights. I've got 30-gram bombs, 40-gram bombs. I can slide that on there, and that just means that this is going to enable me to go further out into the lake. Simple as that. But the other addition with this sort of a setup is, you know, because I'm a massive believer in helping people to keep their fishing as simple as possible. So if you can just set one rod up, for example, that's going to let you fish with a bomb, with a feeder, that's got to be better, hasn't it? With this stem, it means you can also clip on or slide on an open method feeder. Exactly the same stem, slides on there, so that if I want to fish with a method feeder, then that allows me to do that. I just put a nice 4-inch hook length on, one rod, multiple methods. Okay, so all I'm going to do, I've just poured myself a nice hot cup of soup there, minestrone. It's fantastic winter fuel this time of year. It's amazing how much more comfortable you are and warmer you are with a nice hot drink. So I'm going to slide that on there, and all I'm going to do is simply, it's the quick change system again, just put on that very same hook length that I've been fishing with on the 9-foot rod. The versatility you've got with this sort of a system is fantastic, isn't it? I love to see it, and I love to see that people can go out there and spend £40 on a reel and £50 on a rod, and you've got a setup there that you can fish a method, a bomb, on a wide variety of venues. So there we go. Again, just make sure that that is pushed in there, just so you've got that semi-bolt rig, that bolt effect. Same hook length. So let's get this out there. No clip on, so I'm not clipped up. Make sure your drag's undone. I'm just going to go a little bit further out now, towards the middle of the lake, and just see if we can get some indications from fish out there. Because this is an 11-foot rod, I'll just have to adjust that feeder arm so that my tip's out of the water. That wasn't exactly a difficult thing to do, was it? And there we go, we're fishing again. I've gone that little bit further out, and I am getting 1 or 2 indications, but they're not turning into fish. The fishing is much harder than expected, but because I'm getting signs out there, at least it's telling me that there are fish out there. So it's just going to be a case of trying to find out what range they're actually at. Now, you probably saw earlier the way that I was actually hooking the corn. As you can see, I've gone right the way through. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way to hooking corn, but there's 3 different ways here, which I'll quickly show you. So the first one is with a speed stop. It's the way that I have actually been fishing with it up to now, and that is just by putting the hair right through the middle of the piece of corn. So if I just thread that straight through there, through the other side, and then the speed stop can come out there, and it sits that way. So as you can see, it just sits like that, and the speed stop sits on the outside edge of the actual piece of corn. And I've caught loads of fish like that, I haven't got a problem hooking it that way, and that's the way that I've been hooking it today. Now, the other way that you can hook it is, again, put your baiting needle into the speed stop, and if we just get a grain of corn, let me get one that's going to be suitable. There we go. Go on there, and if you can actually go in through the top. So that's the bottom end, as you can see, of the corn. I'll go through the top end, straight down the middle, like that, and then just slightly take your needle out, and you can fish with it like that, so that the widest part of the corn is actually sitting on the bend of the hook, and so the speed stop is coming out of the bottom there. Now, one thing you can also do as well is, if you want to be more critical, you could actually tuck the speed stop into the grain of corn, like so, which means that the speed stop isn't exposed at all. So if you think the fish are being super finicky, and if it gives you more confidence doing it that way, then you can actually do it that way. That way, however, isn't quite so good if you're casting a long way, because the speed stop is inside the corn and it can have a tendency to tear out on the cast, so just be careful of that. So if you want to conceal the actual speed stop, then you can do that way. And now the final way, and this is quite handy if you're fishing, say for example you've got a bomb rod set up, and you might be fishing Sweetcorn, but you might be fishing pellets as well. So when we're fishing pellets, we tend to fish with banded pellets, don't we? So what I've got here on this one is a band. So that's a normal bait band. Alright, so you might have this set up on your rod for fishing with bomb and pellet, but what you can actually do is, if you've got a baiting needle that's got a V in the end, or a hook built in right at the end. Some baiting needles don't have that, but obviously these do. These are the matrix ones, but there are lots out there that have them. It's got a little hook there. Now what you can actually do is, if you get your piece of corn, and if you go in from the bottom end, so we're going from the bottom end through the top, so it comes out of the middle like that, and then if you get your hook on your baiting needle and hook it onto the bait band, stretch it so that it goes much of a lower diameter, stretch it so it's smaller, so it's not as wide and bulky, you can actually thread the corn onto the band itself, like so. So as you can see there, you've got the sweet corn actually on the hair, and the band is concealed inside the corn itself. And you'll find that that's another fantastic way of presenting a corn hook bait. If you think that the fish are being more finicky, you know, and you want to have something that's a lot more discreet, that can come off on the cast. Again, like I said earlier, if you are casting into a strong wind or you're casting further, that can have a tendency to slip out. But if you're only casting 20-25 metres, that can be a great way of just presenting a grain of corn that's that little bit more discreet. That wind isn't getting any warmer, I can tell you. It's time to try that loose fed corn line now. I've been building it up, I've been feeding it. I haven't had a look on it at all, so it'll be interesting to see if there are any fish there. I'm sure if there are any milling about, they will give themselves away as liners. So let's see if there are any fish settled there now. We often find that on this line it does take a little bit of building up. You know, you've got to feed it for a couple of hours or sometimes longer before any fish have settled on it. Obviously that's not always the case, but very much so in winter. Don't be surprised if that is what you've got to do before you can catch on it. But certainly what we've seen at this venue and lots of venues up and down the country, that when you get into those later stages in winter, when you get, you know, from 2 o'clock onwards, certainly when you get to 2:30, you're into the last hour or so of daylight. You know, the light tends to go, you know, it goes a little bit darker, and that can be when you can suddenly get a run of fish. And this is why it's such an important way of fishing, especially if you're fishing matches. Because quite often, you know, you might just find that you're going to catch 2, 3, 4 fish, like I've done today, really, just by dotting around the swim, trying to just pick off fish, where hopefully by feeding a line like I have done today, the line that I'm on now, you're kind of nurturing it for later on in the session, where you're going to go on it, and if the fish turn up, that is where you can catch 4, 5, 6 fish, and you get the bulk of your weight to go with the other single fish that you've been picking off throughout the day. And it doesn't do any harm to feed it, does it? It's out the way, you know, your hands are free while you're fishing elsewhere throughout the main part of the day, and you can just loose feed it via a catapult. You know, it's dead easy to do it. There we go. And that's, wow, that's an angry fish. That's been in there, well, it was less than a minute and a half when it went, you know, and the time is, well, it's 1:30 now, so we are getting to the time. This could be a carp, this one, I think. Getting to the time when lines like this do become stronger, and they are closer in as well. You know, we all know about fish coming into margins later on in sessions. And as you know, I haven't fed this line too far out today, mainly because of the wind, but I do also know that even within long pole range, you're in maximum depth there. So it's just a really nice, confident place to feed, really. But yeah, that was, like I said, I was only in there less than 90 seconds when it went. Just a single grain of corn. It is, it's a carp. I know, it's a big F, wasn't it? Well, and you saw how quickly and easily they can come up, you know, with these 9-foot rods when they come up. Because it's a 9-foot rod, but obviously because of the bend in it, it's only really probably 7 feet-ish when you lift the rod up, you know, so the fish is within netting range, you know, so it's a nice heavy fish, that one. I'll just get the disgorger on him. One thing to remember is that when you're fishing with hair rigs, is just be careful unhooking the fish. You know, it's really easy, particularly if the fish are thrashing about in the net, it's easy to break your hair rigs off. So, you know, it's always best to use a disgorger, you know, and the hook comes out easier as well. There we go. Lovely heavy fish. Let's get that one right. And you'd think with a bite so soon, so quickly, you'd think there'd be more there waiting for us. Let's hope so. Well, they are fantastic fish, aren't they? Look at the size of those. Just shows that, you know, even in winter, you know, there are times of day when the fish really do want to feed, you know, and it's the time of day now. I mean, it's 2:15 now. You can see that the light's just going a little bit. We've fed that line for 3 hours, 4 hours, and now I'm getting one every single cast. That's a fantastic condition fish. Look at that. But they're the fish that, you know, you're hoping are going to come onto these lines later on in the session when you've fed areas out of the way where it's nice and quiet. It's quite a cold fish, to be fair, but that's immaculate, isn't it? What a fantastic conditioned fish that one is. That's what it's all about this time of year. Just taking your time, expecting that it's going to take a while for the fish to find your food. Catch fish throughout the middle part of the session, even if it's just single fish, and then just hopefully you're going to get your timing right where you've built up a swim and nurtured a swim where you can have a late run of fish, just like I have done today. And when they're fish of that sort of size, that's when you can soon rack up some weight. I really enjoyed this session. I've got quite a few like this running right the way through winter. So if you have enjoyed it, please give this one a thumbs up and let me know what kind of venues you'd like me to visit through winter to hopefully help you catch a few more fish going through these colder months, where hopefully it's going to allow you to enjoy your fishing that little bit more.